"Mommy only cries when she thinks I am asleep." Nathan Whitmore would remember those words later, but on the first night, he never heard them. At exactly 10:17 p.m., the glass doors of Whitmore Tower opened onto a cold Manhattan sidewalk, and Nathan stepped outside with his phone still glowing in one hand. Behind him rose 58 floors of steel, marble, and white office light. Ahead, a black sedan waited at the curb, its engine humming beneath the noise of late-night traffic. Nathan was 39, the chief executive officer of Whitmore Capital, and nearly every part of his life moved according to schedule. Meetings started on time. Cars arrived early. Problems were handled before they had the chance to become personal. That was why the young woman across the street caught his attention. She sat beneath the narrow shelter of a bus stop, wearing a faded gray coat, one arm curved around a sleeping little girl. A worn backpack had been placed beneath the child's head like a pillow. The woman faced the street, but whenever headlights passed, Nathan could see the shine of tears on her cheeks. He slowed. Not enough to stop, just enough to notice. His phone buzzed again. A message from the board. A decision needed before morning. "Mr. Whitmore?" His driver called from beside the sedan. Nathan looked away from the woman and stepped into the car. The next night, she was there again. Same bench, same coat, same little girl. Rain tapped against the plastic roof of the shelter while the woman removed her scarf and carefully wrapped it around the child's shoulders. Nathan stood beneath the dry awning of his building and watched her check the digital bus sign. 12 minutes, then delayed, then 18 minutes. She pressed her lips together and looked down at the girl. Only after the child's breathing became slow and even did the woman lower her face into one hand. Her shoulders trembled. Nathan understood something then. She never cried while the little girl was awake. On the third night, he found himself looking toward the bus stop before his driver opened the car door. On the fourth, he told himself it was nothing more than curiosity. On the fifth, his assistant asked why he had started leaving the office at exactly the same time every evening. Nathan had no answer. The woman never approached him, never asked anyone for money, never even glanced toward the expensive cars leaving Whitmore Tower. She simply sat there after what looked like a long shift, her hair loosely tied back, inexpensive shoes darkened by rain, one hand always near her daughter. On the sixth night, Nathan nearly crossed the street. He stopped at the curb and watched the woman open a paper bag. She broke a sandwich in half, gave the larger piece to the child, and held the smaller one for several seconds before wrapping it again untouched. Nathan's phone rang. A senior partner needed him immediately. He turned away. By the time the sedan entered traffic, he had convinced himself he had made the sensible choice. She was a stranger. Her life was not his responsibility. But on the seventh night, Nathan walked out of Whitmore Tower and stopped completely. The bus bench was empty. No gray coat. No worn backpack. No little girl sleeping beneath the weak fluorescent light. For reasons he could not explain, the emptiness unsettled him more than the tears ever had. He checked his watch. 10:17, then 10:21, then 10:24. His driver waited without speaking. Nathan stayed beneath the awning. At 10:26, a small figure suddenly appeared from the narrow alley beside a closed bakery. The little girl. Alone. She ran toward him in sneakers that looked slightly too large, clutching something white in both hands. "Sir," she called. Nathan stepped forward as she stopped in front of him, breathing hard. In her fingers was a crumpled envelope. She looked back toward the alley, then up at him. "My mom does not know I am giving you this," she whispered. "Why are you giving me this?" Nathan asked, keeping his voice low as the little girl glanced back toward the alley. She could not have been more than 6. Her brown hair had loosened from a ponytail, and the sleeves of her pink sweater covered part of her hands. "Because my mom says we should not ask strangers for things," she said. "And I am not asking." Nathan looked at the crumpled envelope. "Then what are you doing?" The girl swallowed. "I just think somebody should read it." Before he could answer, a woman's voice called from the alley. "Sophie." The child froze. A second later, the woman Nathan had watched for 6 nights appeared beneath the yellow light spilling from the back door of the closed bakery. She carried one suitcase in each hand. Her faded gray coat was buttoned to her throat, but the shoulders were dark with rain. "Sophie Carter, what are you doing?" Her eyes moved from her daughter to Nathan, then to the envelope between them. Her face changed instantly. "Oh no." She hurried toward them. "I am so sorry, sir. She did not mean to bother you." Nathan looked at the suitcases, then toward the empty bus stop. She is not bothering me. Sophie, give me that. The girl held the envelope against her chest. But Mom. Now please. Sophie obeyed. The woman took it quickly and tucked it beneath one arm, as if hiding it could erase the moment. Up close, Nathan could see the exhaustion he had only noticed from across the street. Her eyes were red, not from fresh tears now, but from too many nights without enough sleep. A white name tag was still pinned crookedly to her sweater. Emily. I apologize, she said again. She has had a difficult night. Nathan looked past her toward the alley. The bakery door was locked. Beside it sat a child's backpack and a small plastic grocery bag. Are you waiting for the bus? Emily hesitated. Eventually. Eventually? She gave a faint smile that disappeared almost immediately. The next one that gets us where we need to go is not for a while. Sophie looked up at her mother. But we do not have anywhere to go tonight. Emily closed her eyes for 1 second. Sophie. The motel man said we could not stay there anymore. Nathan felt something inside him tighten. For 6 nights, he had watched this woman from beneath the warm lights of Whitmore Tower and reduced her life to a passing question. He had assumed she was waiting for transportation. Assumed someone was coming. Assumed there was a place at the end of the route. Emily bent to pick up the grocery bag. We are fine. Nathan looked at the luggage again. You do not look fine. Her expression changed. Not angry. Guarded. With respect, you do not know us. You are right. He slipped his phone into his coat pocket. I do not. Rain clicked softly against the pavement between them. Sophie reached for Emily's hand. Nathan could have called his driver over. He could have booked a hotel room in less than a minute. He could have solved the immediate problem before Emily finished another sentence. Instead, he remembered the way she had sat on that bench night after night without once looking toward his building. What happened at the motel? He asked. Emily looked toward the street, embarrassed by the answer before she gave it. I was 3 days late on the payment. My hours were cut last week, and tonight they told me the bakery is closing. I thought I had until Friday. Sophie leaned against her side. Emily rested a hand on her daughter's head. We will figure something out. Nathan heard the sentence for what it was. Not confidence. A promise made because a child was listening. His eyes dropped to the envelope tucked beneath Emily's arm. Was that letter for the motel? Emily went still. For the first time, she looked directly at him. No, then who was it for? Sophie answered before her mother could. My dad. Emily's hand tightened around the envelope. Nathan said nothing. Sophie looked between them and added softly. But he is never going to read it. Nathan looked at Emily, but she had already lowered her eyes. The city moved around them as if nothing had changed. Tires whispered over wet pavement. A bus groaned somewhere farther down the avenue. Behind the glass walls of Whitmore Tower, office lights still burned high above the street. Sophie, Emily said softly, that letter is private. The little girl stared at the sidewalk. I know. Then why did you bring it? Sophie rubbed one sneaker against the other. Because you keep writing things you never send. Emily closed her eyes for a moment. Nathan said nothing. There was something in the silence between mother and daughter that felt too fragile to interrupt. Emily finally looked at him. She does not understand. Maybe she understands more than you think, Nathan said. Emily gave him a tired, almost humorless smile. Children understand feelings. They do not always understand consequences. She adjusted the envelope beneath her arm, but Sophie reached toward it again. Mom, please. No, he should read it. Emily's voice tightened. Why? Sophie looked at Nathan. Because he keeps looking at us. The words landed harder than Nathan expected. Emily turned toward him. You have been watching us. Not like that. He heard how defensive it sounded and corrected himself. I leave work around the same time every night. I noticed you at the bus stop. For how long? 6 nights. Emily studied him carefully. And you never said anything. Nathan had no good answer. No. The rain had softened to a mist. Emily nodded once, not accusing him, which somehow made it worse. Most people do not. Sophie took the envelope from her mother before Emily could stop her and held it toward Nathan again. Just read the last part. Emily looked exhausted enough to surrender. Sophie, please, Mom. For several seconds, Emily stared at her daughter. Then her shoulders fell. She handed the envelope to Nathan herself. It was never supposed to leave my bag. Nathan accepted it carefully. I will give it back. That is not what I am worried about. He unfolded the paper. The handwriting was neat at first, then less steady near the bottom. The letter was addressed to someone named Daniel. Emily wrote about Sophie starting first grade, about how she had learned to tie her shoes by herself, about a school project where the children had been asked to draw their families, and Sophie had left one side of the page blank. There were no accusations, no demands, no request for money. That surprised him most. Then Nathan reached the final lines. I am not writing because I want you back. I am writing because someday Sophie may ask why you left, and I still do not know how to answer without making her believe she was not enough. I hope she never learns that the first man who left her taught her mother to expect everyone else would too. Nathan stopped reading. The sounds of Manhattan seemed to fade. For one brief second, he was 9 years old again, standing at the window of a small apartment in Queens while his mother told him his father had gone away for a while. A while became a month. A month became years. Nathan had spent most of his adult life pretending that memory had taught him strength. In truth, it had taught him distance. He folded the letter along its original crease and handed it back. Emily searched his face. Now you know why I did not send it. Nathan glanced at Sophie, who was leaning against her mother with heavy eyes. How long has he been gone? Since before she was born. Does he know about her? Yes. Emily slipped the letter into her coat pocket. Knowing and staying are not the same thing. Nathan looked across the street at the black sedan waiting beneath the lights. One phone call could buy them warmth, food, and a room before midnight. His hand moved toward his pocket. Emily noticed. Please do not. Do not what? Turn this into something money can fix. Nathan frowned. You need somewhere to sleep. Tonight, yes. She looked directly at him. But tomorrow I will still need a job, child care, rent, transportation, and a reason to believe I can handle my own life. Nathan slowly lowered his hand. Emily picked up one suitcase. If you really want to help, do not rescue me for one night. For a moment, Nathan thought he had misunderstood her. People rarely refused his help. They negotiated it, expanded it, or accepted it with relief. But almost no one stood in the rain beside two suitcases and asked him not to make the problem disappear. Then tell me what helping looks like, he said. Emily shifted the heavier suitcase against her leg. I do not know yet. That is not much of a plan. It is the one I have. Sophie leaned against her side, fighting sleep. Nathan glanced toward the black sedan waiting at the curb. His driver had stepped out and opened the rear door, uncertain whether to approach. Nathan lifted one hand, signaling him to stay where he was. Emily noticed. You have somewhere to be. Not anymore. People like you always have somewhere to be. The words were not bitter, just tired. Nathan almost smiled. People like me? Emily looked toward Whitmore Tower, then at his coat, his polished shoes, the waiting car. You know what I mean. He did. Rain gathered along the edge of the bus shelter and fell in steady drops. Nathan stepped closer beneath the awning. I can get you a room tonight without making it complicated. Emily shook her head immediately. That is exactly what I mean. It is a room, not a contract. And tomorrow morning? He did not answer. Emily nodded once. That is the part everyone skips. Sophie tugged gently at her mother's sleeve. I am cold. Emily's expression softened at once. She crouched and pulled the child's coat tighter around her shoulders. I know, sweetheart. Nathan looked away for a second. He had spent years solving problems with the shortest distance between cause and result. Buy the company. Replace the vendor. Move the meeting. Hire more people. Cut the delay. But Emily's life did not fit into a clean decision. One missed paycheck had led to a late motel payment. Reduced hours had made childcare harder. Losing stable housing would make job applications harder. Each problem pulled on another. What kind of work did you do before the bakery? He asked. Emily hesitated. Bookkeeping. For how long? Almost 5 years. Why did you stop? She looked at Sophie. Nathan understood before she answered. Childcare got too expensive. Her father was already gone. My mother helped for a while, but she moved to Arizona after she got sick. I took whatever shifts I could find after that. Do you have a resume? On my phone. References? Yes. Then you are employable. Emily gave a quiet laugh with no humor in it. That sounds simple when you say it. Maybe it is. She looked at him sharply. No, it is simple for you. The sentence stopped him. Emily stood again and brushed a few drops of rain from Sophie's hair. You can call someone and move me to the front of a line. You can pay for a room and turn tonight into a story where the rich man did something generous. Then you go home feeling better. Nathan felt the sting because there was truth in it. That is not what I am trying to do. I know. Her voice softened. That is why I am telling you before you do it. Sophie suddenly opened the grocery bag and pulled out the sandwich Nathan had seen the night before. It was wrapped carefully in wax paper. She broke off a small piece and held it toward him. Do you want some? Nathan stared at it. That is yours. Mom says sharing makes things less scary. Emily looked embarrassed. You do not have to take it. Nathan slowly accepted the piece. It was plain turkey and cheese on white bread. Nothing special. Yet standing beneath a leaking shelter, holding food offered by a child who did not know where she would sleep, Nathan felt something inside him shift. Sophie smiled. See? Less scary. Nathan looked at Emily. There is a diner 2 blocks from here. Warm, open all night, and nobody there needs to know who I am. Emily studied him for a long second. You are not paying my motel bill. I heard you the first time. You are not calling anyone about a job. Not tonight. And you are not making promises. Nathan nodded. No promises. Emily looked down at Sophie, then back at him. Just dinner. Just dinner. Nathan picked up the heavier suitcase before she could object. For the first time in 7 nights, he did not walk past them. The diner was nearly empty when they stepped inside, warm with the smell of coffee, grilled bread, and something sweet baking behind the counter. A silver-haired waitress led them to a booth near the window without giving Nathan a second glance, and for reasons he could not explain, he was grateful for that. Sophie slid in beside Emily and wrapped both hands around the mug of hot chocolate the waitress placed in front of her. Emily ordered tomato soup and toast. Nathan ordered coffee, though he had eaten dinner hours earlier in a private dining room 20 floors above the street. For several minutes, nobody said much. The quiet inside the diner felt different from the silence outside. Softer. Safer. Sophie dipped her toast into the soup and smiled when it became warm and soft. Emily watched her daughter eat before touching her own bowl. Nathan noticed. He had begun noticing too many things. You said bookkeeping, he said. Emily looked up. Yes. What kind? Accounts payable, invoices, payroll support, bank reconciliations. Mostly small businesses. How long? Almost 5 years. That is not nothing. Emily gave a faint smile. It does not look impressive on paper after a long gap. Useful things rarely look impressive on paper. That sounds like something a man in your position would say after someone else has already done the useful part. Nathan almost laughed. Fair. Sophie looked between them. What does he do? Emily glanced toward Nathan. I am guessing something important. I run a company, Nathan said. What kind? Sophie asked. Investment management. She frowned. What does that mean? Nathan paused. People trust us with their money, and we try to make careful decisions with it. Sophie considered this. So you are good with money? Emily closed her eyes briefly. Sophie. Nathan smiled. Usually. The girl nodded as if confirming something important and returned to her hot chocolate. Emily took a slow breath. This is why I did not want to talk about work tonight. Because she might ask me to hire you? Because you might decide that is the obvious solution. Nathan leaned back. Would that be wrong? It would be easy. Those are not the same thing. For you, they probably feel the same. He studied her. Explain. Emily folded her hands around the warm bowl. I have applied to 23 jobs in the last 2 months. Nathan's expression changed. 23. Some never answered. Some asked why I had gaps in employment. One wanted open availability, including weekends, but the pay would not cover childcare. Another offered part-time hours that changed every week, so I could not arrange anything stable for Sophie. 2 wanted a permanent address for onboarding. I used the motel, but that ended tonight. Nathan said nothing. People hear that I need a job and think the problem is one missing paycheck, she continued. It is not. It is transportation, childcare, school pickup, rent deposits, application forms that assume you already have things you are trying to earn back. One late fee becomes another late fee. One missed shift becomes fewer hours. Then suddenly you are standing outside with 2 suitcases while everyone wonders why you did not plan better. Nathan stared into his coffee. He had spent his career studying risk, but Emily's life had almost no margin for error. A delayed bus mattered. A sick child mattered. An unexpected $20 expense mattered. So what would you do if someone offered you a real interview? He asked. A real one. No favor. No guaranteed outcome. Emily hesitated. I would show up. Even this week. If I could get Sophie to school. And after school? That is where things get complicated. Sophie spoke without looking up. Mrs. Alvarez lets me sit in the bakery sometimes. Emily gave her daughter a gentle look. The bakery is closing, remember? Sophie's spoon stopped moving. Nathan watched the realization cross her face. Another small support disappearing. Another door closing. He looked at Emily. What if the interview were scheduled after school drop-off? She narrowed her eyes. Nathan. It was the first time she had used his name. I said no phone calls tonight. I am not making one. You are thinking about it. He could not deny that. Emily's expression softened. You want to fix this because fixing things is how you know what to do. Nathan looked toward the rain streaking the diner window. Maybe. Then start by understanding it. He turned back to her. I am trying. Good. She lifted her spoon. Then listen before you decide what I need. Nathan nodded slowly. For the first time in years, he had no argument ready. And for the first time that night, Emily finally began to eat. By the time Sophie finished her hot chocolate, her eyelids were drooping, and Emily began gathering their things with the careful movements of someone who knew that every warm place eventually came with a closing time. She folded the paper napkin around the half piece of toast Sophie had not eaten and tucked it into the grocery bag. Nathan watched without commenting. Nothing wasted. Not even a crust. There is one thing I can do without making a promise, he said. Emily looked at him cautiously. What is that? I can give you an address. For what? An interview. Her expression changed immediately. At your company? Yes. Nathan, you said you would show up for a real interview. A real interview means I apply like everyone else. Then apply like everyone else. She held his gaze. And you do nothing? Nothing. No call to human resources? No. No message telling someone to be nice to me? No guarantee. No guarantee. Sophie opened one sleepy eye. That is a lot of no. Nathan smiled faintly. Sometimes no is useful. Emily looked down at the table, thinking. What position? Bookkeeping associate. The finance operations team has been hiring. How do you know? It is my company. Right. She almost smiled. Nathan took a business card from his wallet, turned it over, and wrote an email address on the back. Send your resume here. It goes to recruiting, not to me. Emily did not take the card immediately. And if I am not qualified, then you do not get the job. And if I am, then you deserve the chance to prove it. That answer seemed to matter. She finally accepted the card and slipped it carefully into her coat pocket. A door, she said. Not a rescue. Nathan nodded. A door. Outside, the rain had weakened to a fine mist. Nathan carried the heavier suitcase while Emily held Sophie's hand. When they reached the corner, Emily stopped. You really do not have to come farther. Where are you going? There is a 24-hour family shelter on West 49th Street. I called earlier. They said they might have a bed after midnight. Nathan glanced at Sophie, who was barely awake now. That is almost a mile from here. We can manage. At least let my driver take you. Emily hesitated. Nathan added, transportation is not a rescue. She gave him a tired look. You are learning quickly. 10 minutes later, Emily and Sophie were in the back seat of Nathan's sedan while he remained on the sidewalk. His driver had looked surprised when Nathan told him to take them to the shelter first and come back. Nathan did not explain. He walked several blocks toward home alone, his hands in his coat pockets, listening to the city differently than he had an hour earlier. The next morning, at 8:42, an email notification appeared on his computer. Emily Carter. Subject, bookkeeping application. Nathan opened the message, saw the attached resume, then stopped himself before reading farther. He forwarded it to recruiting with 4 words. Standard process. No exceptions. 2 days later, Emily sat in the public library near Sophie's school, wearing a clean blouse beneath her gray coat. She had printed 2 copies of her resume, spent $8 on subway fare, and skipped breakfast so Sophie could have lunch money. At 11:30, she walked into Whitmore Tower carrying a plain folder. Nathan did not know she had arrived. That was exactly how he wanted it. 45 minutes later, Emily completed the first interview and a bookkeeping assessment. She caught a duplicated vendor charge, corrected a reconciliation error, and answered every question without mentioning Nathan once. When she left the building, she allowed herself one small breath of hope. Upstairs, Nathan was reviewing quarterly projections when his assistant, Claire Bennett, entered with a tablet. You asked not to be involved in the accounting interviews, she said. I did. Then you should know Ms. Carter was not advanced to the second round. Nathan looked up. Was her technical assessment poor? Claire hesitated. No. It was one of the highest scores this month. Nathan set down his pen. Then why was she rejected? Claire looked at the screen. Employment gaps. Temporary housing history. Limited recent office experience. Nathan went very still. For the first time, the problem in front of him was not Emily's lack of opportunity. It was the system he had assumed was fair. Nathan did not call Emily. He wanted to, and that was exactly why he stopped himself. Instead, he asked Claire for the full hiring criteria used for bookkeeping applicants over the previous 6 months. By noon, 3 folders and a spreadsheet covered the conference table in his office. Claire stood beside him while he scrolled through rejection codes that looked harmless until they began repeating. Employment gap. Temporary address. Schedule instability. Limited recent office experience. How many people were screened out for these reasons? Nathan asked. Claire checked the report. A little over 200. How many passed the technical assessment? 73. Nathan looked up. 73 qualified people. Qualified by skills testing, yes. The room felt colder. Nathan leaned back and stared through the glass wall toward the city. He had approved efficiency targets, faster hiring cycles, lower turnover, and stricter scheduling standards. He had never told anyone to reject struggling parents or people between permanent addresses. But the system had learned to treat complicated lives as risk. Who approved these criteria, he asked. Human Resources, Operations, and Legal reviewed them. Claire paused. You approved the broader hiring framework last year. Nathan nodded slowly. That was enough. Across town, Emily sat on a bench outside Sophie's school with the rejection email still unopened for the second time. She had read it once on the subway and locked her phone before disappointment could become something heavier. At 3:10, Sophie came running through the school doors. Did you get the job? Emily forced a small smile. Not this one. Sophie slowed. Did you do bad? No, sweetheart. Then why? Emily looked at the parents gathering around them, each carrying bags, phones, schedules, and private worries of their own. Sometimes doing your best does not mean you get what you want. Sophie frowned. That does not sound fair. Emily squeezed her hand. Fair does not always happen right away. That evening, Emily returned to the family shelter and filled out 2 more applications after Sophie fell asleep. She did not go back to the bus stop. At 10:17, Nathan stepped outside Whitmore Tower and looked across the street anyway. The bench was empty. This time, the emptiness felt different. It no longer reminded him of a stranger he had failed to notice. It reminded him of a pattern he had helped build. The next morning, Nathan called the first of several meetings with Human Resources, Recruiting, and Operations. He placed the report on the table. I want these screening criteria reviewed immediately. The head of Human Resources frowned. Because of one candidate. Because of 73. Silence settled over the room. Nathan tapped the report. If someone can do the work, I do not want caregiving gaps, temporary housing, or irregular past schedules used as shortcuts for incompetence. Those factors can predict scheduling risk, one manager said carefully. Then ask about scheduling, Nathan replied. Do not make poverty or caregiving history stand in for ability. He did not order anyone to hire Emily. Instead, he asked that her application be reconsidered under a neutral review because her technical results contradicted the reasons she had been screened out. The same review would apply to other recent applicants affected by those criteria. 2 days later, Emily's phone rang while she was walking from Sophie's school toward the shelter. Ms. Carter, a recruiter said, we would like to invite you back for a second interview. Emily stopped on the sidewalk. I thought I had already been rejected. The screening process is under review. Her eyes narrowed. Did Nathan Whitmore ask you to hire me? Mr. Whitmore is not participating in your interview or final decision. That answer mattered. Then yes, Emily said. I will come. The following morning, she sat before a 3-person panel and answered every question without mentioning Nathan once. She explained vendor reconciliation, payroll timing, invoice controls, and a duplicate expense entry hidden inside a sample ledger. 40 minutes later, she walked out unsure of the result, but certain of one thing. She had been judged on what she could do. Upstairs, Nathan waited until the panel submitted its decision before asking Claire for the report. She placed it on his desk. They were unanimous. Nathan looked at her. Claire smiled. For Emily Carter. Emily received the offer at 4:12 that afternoon, while sitting beside Sophie in the children's section of the public library. She read the email once, then again, slower this time, as if the words might disappear if she trusted them too quickly. Full-time bookkeeping associate. Stable weekday schedule. Benefits after the probation period. A salary that was not extraordinary by Manhattan standards, but to Emily, it looked like breathing room. Sophie washed her face carefully from across a table covered with crayons and picture books. Is it good? Emily pressed her lips together, trying to keep her voice steady. It is good. Did you get the job? Emily nodded. Sophie climbed out of her chair and wrapped both arms around her. I knew you would. Emily held her tightly. I did not. I did. That evening, Nathan was still in his office when Claire entered carrying a plain white envelope. This was left downstairs for you. Nathan looked up. From whom? Emily Carter. He took it after Claire left and immediately recognized the paper. It was the same letter Sophie had carried through the rain. Nathan unfolded it carefully, but Emily had not changed the original words. Beneath the final paragraph, she had added one new line. I used to write letters to people who left. Now I am teaching my daughter to notice the ones who stay. Nathan read the sentence twice. There was no thank you for the job, no gratitude for the salary, no suggestion that he had saved her. Somehow, that made the message mean more. Over the following weeks, Emily began work at Whitmore Capital. She arrived on time every morning after taking Sophie to school, learned the internal accounting system quickly, corrected old reconciliation errors, and earned the trust of her supervisor without Nathan stepping into the department. People occasionally whispered when they realized the chief executive officer knew her name, but Emily ignored them. She had spent too long rebuilding her life to explain herself to people who had not lived it. Meanwhile, the hiring review Nathan had started continued through several meetings. The company did not transform overnight. Policies were examined, managers argued, legal teams asked questions, and new screening standards were tested. But one principle remained. Caregiving gaps, temporary housing, and irregular work history could no longer substitute for an honest evaluation of skill. 2 months passed. Emily saved almost everything she could. She stayed at the family shelter longer than she wanted, packed Sophie's lunches carefully, used the subway instead of ride services, and counted every dollar before spending it. Then one Friday afternoon, she signed a lease for a small one-bedroom apartment in Queens. The building was old. The kitchen was narrow. The radiator made a strange knocking sound whenever it warmed up. Sophie thought it was perfect. On move-in day, she stood beside the bedroom window with her stuffed bear pressed against her chest. This is ours. As long as I keep paying rent, Emily said. Sophie looked around again. Can we stay? Emily smiled, though her eyes had already filled. That is the plan. A week later, Emily stopped outside Nathan's office near the end of the workday. She wore a navy cardigan and carried a paper coffee cup. I wanted to tell you before Sophie found a way to announce it herself. Nathan leaned back. That sounds serious. We found an apartment. His expression softened. That is good news. It is. Emily placed something on his desk. The business card he had given her at the diner. I do not need this anymore. Nathan picked it up. You could have thrown it away. No. She glanced toward the folded letter beside his lamp. Some things should be returned. He understood. Emily turned toward the door, then stopped. Nathan. Yes. The hiring changes matter. They are still being worked out. I know. But people are getting interviews now who might not have before. Nathan looked at her quietly. That should have happened a long time ago. Still counts. She gave him a small smile and left. At 10:17 that evening, Nathan stepped outside Whitmore Tower and looked toward the bus stop out of habit. The bench was empty. For the first time, the sight did not feel like absence. It felt like proof that some empty places meant someone had finally found somewhere better to go. Several months later, on the first Friday of Sophie's spring break, Nathan stepped through the glass doors of Whitmore Tower at exactly 10:17 in the evening. The air was softer now. Winter had finally loosened its grip on New York, and the sidewalk that had once glistened with cold rain was dry beneath the city lights. Nathan adjusted the cuff of his charcoal suit and looked toward the bus stop out of habit. He still did that every night. Most evenings, the bench was empty. Tonight, it was not. Emily stood beneath the shelter wearing a light blue coat, her brown hair loose around her shoulders. Sophie stood beside her holding 2 paper cups with both hands. She saw Nathan first. Mr. Whitmore, she called. waving so hard that one of the lids nearly slipped. Nathan stopped, then smiled before he could hide it. He crossed the street. "What are you two doing here?" Sophie lifted one cup proudly. "We brought you hot chocolate." Nathan glanced at Emily. "Was this your idea?" "Absolutely not," Emily said. "I was informed." Sophie frowned. "You agreed." After 20 minutes of negotiation, Nathan accepted the cup. "Then I appreciate the persistence." Sophie nodded seriously. "You always look cold when you walk past us." Nathan looked down at the cup, then back at her. "That may be the nicest criticism I have ever received." Emily laughed softly. The sound surprised him. Months earlier, he had known her by the way she tried not to cry. Now he knew the way her face changed when she laughed, the way she raised one eyebrow when Sophie exaggerated a story, the way she spoke more confidently about work than she ever had about herself. They sat together on the same bench where Emily had once waited with nowhere certain to go. Sophie took the middle seat. Traffic moved through the intersection. A delivery truck stopped at the light. Somewhere nearby, a restaurant door opened and released a burst of warm conversation into the street. "How is the apartment?" Nathan asked. "Still small," Emily said. "Still ours." "The radiator still knocks," Sophie added. "It sounds like it is trying to talk." "And apparently it has opinions," Emily said. Nathan smiled. "What does it say?" Sophie thought carefully. "Mostly that we should get a dog." Emily gave Nathan a warning look. "Do not encourage that." "I have said nothing." "Your face is encouraging her." Sophie laughed. For a while, they drank in silence. Nathan looked across the street at Whitmore Tower. From this side, the building seemed colder than it did from inside. "Work is going well," Emily said. "My supervisor asked me to train one of the new hires next month." Nathan turned toward her. "That is fast. I am good at my job." There was no hesitation in her voice now. No apology. Nathan nodded. "I know." Emily looked toward the building too. The new hiring policy helped her get through the first screening. "Who?" "The woman I am training." Emily paused. She spent 3 years caring for her father before coming back to work. Nathan was quiet. The change he had started was still imperfect. There were meetings, revisions, disagreements, and more work ahead. But tonight, it had a face. Sophie leaned against Emily's arm and yawned. Emily reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. Nathan recognized the shape immediately. "Another letter?" he asked. "A copy of the old one." She handed it to him. Nathan unfolded the page carefully. The original words were still there. Beneath the final paragraph, Emily had added one more line. "I used to think being left behind meant I had to become strong enough to need no one. Now I know strength can also mean knowing who deserves to stay." Nathan read it once, then folded the paper along the same crease. He looked at Emily. She held his gaze without looking away. Sophie broke the silence. "Are you going to walk past us again?" Nathan looked at the little girl, then at the woman beside her. Months ago, he might have searched for the perfect answer. Tonight, he did not need one. "No," he said. Sophie smiled. "Good." Nathan slipped the letter into his coat pocket. The bus pulled to the curb with a soft hiss, doors opening beneath the shelter light, but none of them stood. Nathan had spent most of his life believing that changing someone's future required money, influence, or power. A little girl with an envelope had taught him something simpler. Sometimes the first thing a person needs is not to be rescued. Sometimes they only need to be seen clearly enough that someone finally chooses to stay.